The 2022 NHL Draft has now come to a close, but there's still plenty of deals to be done. Today we're going to look over the latest NHL trade rumors on the players who have not been dealt. It's been a busy few days. Still lots of big names to be moved, plus with the latest on all the pending UFAs. So today we're looking at the Calgary Flames, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Vancouver Canucks, Ottawa Senators, and more. Coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news, some free agent rumors, and trade rumors to take a look at here today. First up, a few signings to look at. The Florida Panthers earlier announced a couple of signings, one including defenseman Lucas Carlson. He gets a new one-year extension. It's a two-way deal. He gets $800,000 at the NHL level and $300,000 at the American Hockey League level. So certainly, that's a lucrative deal for American Hockey League players. So we tend to see that with players that tend to become more experienced at the AHL level and kind of become pretty important at that level. So we'll see. He's likely going to have to spend time at both NHL and AHL this year. They've also signed Eetu Luostarinen on a two-year extension at $1.5 million. That's a pretty good, valuable contract. I think he proved to be a pretty valuable player there down the stretch last year for Florida. And the LA Kings have come to terms with pending restricted free agent forward Adrian Kempe. He gets a 4-year deal with a value of $5.5 million per season. Again, another reasonable contract, I think. Kempe's proved to be a pretty good player for the Kings, pretty important part of their offense, and I think that's a pretty reasonable contract. As I mentioned, it's been an incredibly busy couple of days with the first round of the draft taking place last night, and of course we saw the rest of the draft take place today. Several trades, many trades today that only included draft picks, teams moving up or down within various draft rounds and things like that, but lots of players changing teams as well. One thing that we saw that was interesting is that after the Minnesota Wild had announced the contract signing of an extension for Marc-Andre Fleury, who signed a 2-year deal to stay in Minnesota, there was apparently a meeting that took place between Cam Talbot's agent and Wild GM Billy Guerin. Now, of course, we know that last year Cam Talbot, after Fleury got there, he didn't seem to be the most happy with his playing time as Fleury kind of took over the starting role through the playoffs. And in the beginning, it was fine. They were kind of rotating back and forth a lot. But then when it came to the most important time of year, Talbot sat on the bench. And there just seemed to be a little bit of a not overly contentness there from his side of it. At least that's the way it appeared to the media after the end of season, and everything kind of got talked about a little bit further. But now that Fleury's back in the picture for a couple more years, of course Talbot only has one more year left, and Fleury's new contract will still pay him slightly more than Talbot as well. So the conversation was really wasn't sure, but basically what his agent said to the media afterwards was that Billy has a lot to think about. So it kind of led people to think that perhaps Talbot and his agent weren't thrilled and that maybe they would like a trade. I mean, there's no guarantee, that's not been confirmed, so we can't go on record and say Cam Talbot wants out of Minnesota or anything of that nature. It just makes you wonder what the conversation was. Usually it's not something that you automatically see. If they were happy that Fleury was back and there was no confusion or questions on his role, I don't think that conversation ever takes place. So clearly there seems to be some concerns. Obviously some people speculated that Talbot may want an extension himself to kind of have the Wild show him that he's just as valuable as Fleury, so to speak. And there's others that said that the more likely scenario was that they were unhappy and that Talbot's probably going to take a backseat to Fleury and that perhaps he would like them to consider a trade. Doesn't mean he demanded one. And we don't really know what the case is based on the comments from the agent. It kind of left it pretty vague and kind of up to interpretation, and so we don't really know the full story. When Guerin was talking to media afterwards, he basically said that he doesn't have to do anything, that Talbot's under contract for another year. He's a member of the Minnesota Wild, and that he he's under contract and he expects them to be a big part of the team. So said all the right things, but you could tell he was annoyed when he had the meeting and when he was talking to the media. And, we don't really know what to make of that. Now, the other part of this that kind of stirred the rumors a little bit further after is there was a long conversation on the draft floor between Bill Guerin and Kyle Dubas. We know that the Maple Leafs need to figure out their goaltending. That's certainly a big part of their focus right now. So there was some speculation of Could they be talking about Talbot? I'm not going to say that that was the case, but it wouldn't be shocking if Dubas was maybe just inquiring, perhaps, because they may need to pivot in a different direction. I still think the Maple Leafs' focus is to sign Jack Campbell if they can, but if it turns out that that's not going to be a possibility, then they need to find another option, and obviously a lot of the other goalie options have been kind of taken up here. We saw a case of Fleury staying in Minnesota. We saw a case of Ville Husso going to Detroit. New Jersey's got their goaltending situation figured out. Alexander Georgiev in New York's already been traded. The Avalanche got their situation now by picking up Georgiev. So, there's still some goalies out there, like Darcy Kemper, for example, and of course Campbell himself. But the goalie carousel went on quite a ride over the last day or two, and a lot of spots have already been taken. So there's not as much on the market as there was as of a few days ago. So there might have a less likely, or more likely, I should say, to go the trade route should Campbell not return. And I guess at this point they don't know. There's been some talk to teams like the Oilers, for example, may offer Campbell as much as 5 to 6 years at $5 million, and that might be more of a financial appetite than Dubas and the Leafs have for their goaltending. So it's hard to say, right? It's all speculation, but at this point, I do think it's fair to say that the Talbot camp might not be overly thrilled. Don't know if that's going to lead to anything. And of course, when it comes to Toronto, though, we do know that they traded Peter Mrazek, created some more cap flexibility. So I do think that's going to give Dubas the option to be a little bit more aggressive with a final push here to see if they can sign Jack Campbell. But if all else fails, they're going to have to pivot to the UFA and trade market. And like I said, there's not a lot of UFA goalies now. So could a guy like Cam Talbot be a guy they talk to? Will they look to Darcy Kemper in free agency? Would they consider John Gibson in Anaheim? I don't think so. I don't think Gibson's really high on their priority list, but they got to do something, and the dominoes are starting to fall here. So it makes you wonder where things are going to go. Now, staying with the Leafs for a moment, there are some other deals that we could possibly see. As I mentioned before, the situation with Rasmus Sandin is still a concern, still unsigned, and the logjam on the blue line for the Leafs, especially on the left side, is a bit of an issue. And of course, they also have Justin Hall, who's been highly rumored to be something that they'd like to move on from the final year of his contract with a 1-year deal at $2 million. So I do think that the Maple Leafs, outside of trying to figure out their goaltending, which obviously has to be priority number one, I would not be shocked in the next little while between now and free agency if we do see a move on defense, whether it's shedding the Justin Hall contract or maybe even talking to a guy like Jake Muzzin and moving on from one of their veteran D-men to kind of open up some additional space, which would be great for them to be able to do other things to the roster, and at the same time make sure that they can keep Sandin happy and get him a more, a regular spot to play at this fall. So we'll see. The Leafs are still going to be an interesting team to watch here. Now, there's definitely going to be some RFAs that we don't see get qualified, which are going to become UFAs here in short order. Obviously, we're going to find that out over here over the next few days as well. When it comes to the Maple Leafs, Dubas did confirm that one RFA, like Pierre Engvall, would get his qualifying offer, and that Andre Kasha, on the other hand, they weren't sure yet. Of course, when the RFAs that have arbitration rights, there's some talk that there's a lot of teams that just might walk away from players because they're concerned over what they're going to get, and if they can't walk away from the award because they can only walk away from it. I think it's over if it's an award over $4.5 million, they can choose to walk and make the player UFA. But if there's some players that could get $4 million, and if the teams can't really afford that or don't want to pay that, then they're kind of stuck with it. So ultimately, we might see players not be qualified instead, which is going to probably create more of these guys becoming UFA than you'd normally see. But Kasha is a player that could be in that category. A couple guys in Chicago to watch as well is Dylan Strome and Dominic Kubalik. There's belief that the Hawks may not qualify either one, which is mind-blowing to me. I don't see how they could not have a trade market to at least get something for those guys. To me, Kyle Davidson's not off to a great start as his young career here as a general manager in Chicago. The Brandon Hagel trade, to me, to Tampa wasn't too bad, but, obviously the Alex DeBrincat trade to Ottawa, to me, they got fleeced in that deal. That's a steal of a deal for the Ottawa Senators. And of course, now the other big thing with the Blackhawks, too, is Patrick Kane. What is he thinking at this point? We've seen the Blackhawks time and time again take away Patrick Kane's favorite players and move them along, and he's always just continued to play with new people and make them productive and be a star player. and not really complain about it, at least not publicly. So in the case of Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat was one of the main reasons why he said he would stay within the organization and go through this rebuild, because he likes playing with DeBrincat and like their chemistry, and that was one of the positives that he cited about wanting to stick around. Well, now DeBrincat is not there. We've seen him move on from Panarin. We've seen him move on from Nick Schmaltz, who was a center he liked playing with before. It's just a couple of prime examples. There's been others before that, but there are new reports though that Patrick Kane will be meeting with his representatives and the Blackhawks again to kind of re-go over the future plans here of the player in the not too distant future. I believe it's in the coming days, likely before free agency. So I would not be one bit surprised at this point if Kane tells the Hawks that he would consider a trade. At this point, we have no concrete evidence to say that Taves or Kane has given the Hawks consent to make a trade, because they both have a no-move clause, full no-move, control everything. So they're going to have to be involved if a deal is going to go down. And they've both been on board so far, but seeing as what's gone down here in Chicago, I mean, they even traded Kirby Dach this weekend. And to me, that's another deal. Montreal really got themselves a good young top center, potentially. And to me, I don't think they got a great return. Like the returns going on these guys, like Chicago might have got themselves in the first round 3 different times on Thursday night, but really, like they didn't get a great return, in my opinion, for what they were moving out. So I can understand why some of these players, like Kane especially, would be maybe having a different thought here, different tune. So we'll see where this goes, but I would not be shocked with the confirmation that a new meeting is going to be taking place here in a few days, that maybe Kane changes his mind. If he became available, that would be tremendous. And I'm sure teams right now are probably seeing these other deals that the Blackhawks have been doing for Dach and DeBrincat especially, and they're going to probably be licking their chops going, we can get Patrick Kane and we're not going to have to give up a whole lot, because look at how these other deals have gone, right? So we'll have to see where this goes, but Kane might be a player to watch going into the next couple of weeks here. Now, JT Miller's another big name that has not been moved here as of yet. There was apparently a deal really close with the New York Islanders. The deal fell apart late into the process. No real clarification exactly what the problem was or what caused it to not happen. But the Islanders were involved with their number 13 pick. They instead ended up pivoting and acquiring Alexander Romanov from Montreal instead. But of course, it's believed right now the interest is still very high in Miller. Lots of teams have had conversations with the Canucks around the forward here that's entering the final year of his contract, coming off a 99-point season. But the asking price just remains high, and teams at this point seem to be a little bit leery of paying it. Belief is that maybe once we enter free agency, if a deal has not yet come together, that teams that maybe miss out on signing some players that they were hoping to bring in from other teams maybe come back and kind of pivot back to Vancouver here and kind of reconsider and maybe consider paying a different price to get Miller on their roster. But at this point, there's still high interest. The other teams besides the Islanders that are probably out at this point because they already traded their first rounder. You're still looking at teams like the Washington Capitals, who had a lot of interest. The Rangers were reportedly right near the top of that list. I wouldn't be shocked if they revisit it. And of course, that's probably going to be highly dependent on what else they do in free agency. Can they get Ryan Strome or Andrew Kopp signed? Those are big questions that they may not know the answer to. And depending on where those things go, could certainly impact that. But I still think a Miller trade is still pretty likely. It's just something that's going to take a little bit longer than the Canucks and other teams might have been hoping for. Now in Calgary, still status quo on Johnny Gaudreau, still no clarity. Brad Treliving and his management team is still looking for clarification from Gaudreau what their intentions are, and they still have not really been told much of anything. It's still pretty quiet on that front, which is concerning. Obviously, Brad Treliving spoke to the media today. Seemed optimistic, but the media did say that he's a pretty optimistic person by nature, so it's kind of hard to get a read on how he's really feeling about it, because that's just how he always seems to come off, no matter what the situation is. So obviously they're doing their best. He again reiterated that they're going to do everything they can to try to reach a deal with Gaudreau. But the way Pierre LeBrun was talking to me, it kind of sounded like hope was fading a little bit, and that the longer this drags on, the more likely it is that he'll go. But it's really hard to say that with any certainty. We've seen the odd case, like Steven Stamkos is a good example, that came right down to the 11th hour, looked like he was leaving, and then he re-signed. So you just don't know, right? I think Gaudreau definitely wants to take a look at what else is out there before he makes his decision. And like I said, it's been belief for a long time that he's going to go, but We don't really know that for sure. Of course, like I said, the other big team to watch here possibly is Ottawa. Doesn't sound like they're done. Lots of other moves being discussed through Ottawa media. They're still pushing hard to trade Matt Murray. They've come close on multiple occasions. Thankfully, the one deal with the Buffalo Sabres did not go through, because that was the first round pick was in being involved in that as well, which is what they used in the DeBrincat trade. So thankfully that didn't work out. But obviously they've had multiple conversations with a variety of teams that are still looking for goalies, including the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hard to say if the Leafs will circle back to Murray. It really boils down to how other things go. And they're also been having numerous conversations when it comes to trying to add another defenseman, preferably a right shot defenseman. They were reportedly involved in some conversations around Jacob Chikrin in Arizona. I don't know that they were as serious in that front, but there was some talks as well, according to Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun, that they were talking to Florida about a potential deal involving Mackenzie Weegar, who would probably be a pretty good fit on the right side. There was some speculation about a Brandon Carlo conversation out of Boston too. I don't know that that's any truth to that, but I know Weegar was one that was confirmed by the media as something that they're at least discussing. I don't know how serious things got. It's believed that Connor Brown, who's entering the final year of his contract and has made it known that he intends to test free agency, could very well be one of the players included in a deal to try to land a defenseman. They may have to include another pick or prospect along with that, depending on who the player is, of course. But he could be a good roster player on a pretty good contract for at least a year to help a team out on the other side of things and getting a deal done. And the Senators are still reportedly pushing for a potential signing of Claude Giroux. They're still in the mix there. So we'll see. Like I said, they're not done at all. They might be able to move some bodies to free up some space, get a defenseman, and possibly Giroux. They may not get it all done. I think it's pretty unlikely that they'll do it all, but at the same time, that's what they're trying to do, and deals that we might see over the next coming days. So let me know your thoughts on what we discussed here today in the comments, and we'll discuss further. Hopefully we'll have some more clarity on some of these situations in the coming days leading into July 13th free agency, which could be another incredibly busy time. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around, and we'll keep you up to date with all the ongoings of the offseason. We'll keep you here at Top Shelf Hockey, informed the entire NHL. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.